Hello, welcome to Recapping with Delora
and Ashley.
Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Recapping Podcast.
Also, comment, rate, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We're on all the things.
We would love to hear your ratings of the movies and shows we review.
Email us your audio file to recappingpodcast@gmail.com and we will play it during the show.
Or DM us on Instagram and we will post and read it on air.
Thank you guys so much for listening.
Thank you.
Ashley!
Hey girl, hey, how goes it?
Girl, it's going. I'm excited about this week's recap.
What are we recapping again, as if I don't know?
Only Murders in the Building, a Hulu original. It is a comedy/mystery series. It's 10 episodes, rated MA, and the episodes run about 30 minutes, 30 to 35 minutes, depending on which episode you're talking about. So let's get into the summary. 3 strangers share an obsession with true crime and suddenly find themselves wrapped up in one when a ghastly death occurs inside their exclusive Upper West Side apartment building. The trio suspects murder and employs their precise knowledge of true crime to investigate the truth. Perhaps even more explosive are the lies they tell one another. Soon, the endangered trio comes to realize a killer might be living among them as they race to decipher the mounting clues before it's too late. Ashley, I'm going to highlight the 3 stars of this series. Steve Martin as Charles, Martin Short as Oliver, and Selena Gomez as Mabel. Rotten Tomatoes gave this series 100% critics, and for audience, 94%.
This is our best rated series ever, or in a very long time?
Very long time. I think Queen's Gambit is up there, but yeah.
Wow.
And our beloved Google users gave this series 85%. Ashley, what are your scores?
It is a B for me. I am with the Google users like 99% of the time. The reunion of Steve Martin and Martin freaking Short, who I have not seen together since Father of the Bride, brought me so much joy.
Absolutely.
Now, I cannot say the main mystery of the show intrigued me as much as the revelations surrounding our trio, which is why it's not an A for me. I just wasn't as deeply invested as I wanted to be, but I still very much enjoyed the ride. And I have one additional note that I'm going to save for the end. So it is a B for me, Delora. What about for you?
Ashley, I gave this series an A-. I love Steve Martin. I love Martin Short. Like, I actually love Martin Short a little bit more than Steve Martin because he is the funniest.
Yes, he is.
And the thing about this series that I enjoy so much was the humor. It was so funny. And I laughed more the second time around than the first. So I really loved it. And I love the cliffhangers after each episode, some better than others, but I was engaged. I will say towards the end, I wasn't in love with it. So that's part of the reason why I didn't get a higher score, but I have such a near and dear love for the 2 main guys. When it came to Selena Gomez, though, I'm not going to lie, I thought that was an interesting choice to just inject her in this because, again, I don't know if she's done anything really serious acting wise. Like, this is like, that's non-Disney kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Selena Gomez fans would have to let us know because I don't follow her career that closely either.
And she's a singer. But yeah, so it was an interesting choice, but I really enjoyed their chemistry overall. So
yeah, they're in like a whole text group together post show. So that's super cute.
I love it. I love it. And fun note, according to Vulture, this is Hulu's most watched comedy ever.
Makes sense.
Without,
Legends.
exactly. With no surprise, season 2 is absolutely happening. So, all right, with that said, let's get into our spoiler alert. Episode 1, True Crime. Upper West Side neighbors Charles, Oliver, and Mabel bond over a shared love of true crime. When a fellow resident dies in their building, the trio determine to solve the mystery and record an accompanying podcast. Ashley, are you into true crime?
Yes. I'm not.
You are.
I'm not super into true crime podcast, but yeah, I've talked about the fact that I like a good true crime documentary. I have listened to some true crime podcasts though. Like I listened to the one that they did that was a rehash of the death of Natalie Wood. I listened to the one on Christina Grimmie that happened here in Orlando. Like I've listened to some of them, but for the fanatics, no, I'm not a fanatic. What about you?
Not really. I'm not. I think we kind of talked about this briefly one time. I'm into like cults and things, like documentaries about how people get sucked into weird situations where they follow a charismatic leader.
I mean, that's true crime. I'd throw that in the true crime category.
Would you?
Yeah.
I guess that's my genre. I'm not really into solving murders or anything like that because I
don't want to follow a real crime as it's happening the way that they do in the show. Like I want it to be resolved, and then I just want to hear the facts and information. Like I wouldn't want to be a part of like an active investigation. That's way too emotional for me. Like it's too heavy.
It's extremely heavy, actually. So in this episode 1, there's this gentleman on the phone, slicked hair, trash bag in hand, on the phone, talking about a package, and he's gone. The events of the show, or the main mystery of the show, happens where the fire alarm goes off, and they find out that there was a murder. It is presumed that it is a suicide. The resident in question was the gentleman who was on that elevator with Charles, Mabel, and Oliver. Mabel, Charles, and Oliver are very independent people. They're all kind of lonely. I don't know if you noticed that. You have Charles, who's randomly making omelets and has all these peppers. You have Oliver, who you can tell is very charismatic, but still very much alone, with bills piling up, by the way. And then you have Mabel, which, mind you, I don't know anybody under the age of 65 by that name. Living by herself, it looks like a renovation, you know what I mean? And they are actively listening to this podcast called All Is Not Okay in Oklahoma. First of all, I love how they play up the titles of these podcasts, these true crime podcasts. Have you noticed that?
I mean, the title makes a big difference in the marketing, and as we know, the strategy as to what it is you're going to be talking about. So it makes sense that the titling was important. But I think what's funny about this particular show, about the podcast and all of that, is the whole Tina Fey angle of it, right? The fact that Tina Fey is this whole podcast, mastermind. So it just adds, a little more flavor to it than it would be if, in my opinion, if Tina wasn't in the show.
And so one of the things I noticed actually more the second time around was how active listeners they were of it. Like they were ready when the podcast dropped and they were all taking notes on what happened. So the fire alarm goes off and everyone, scatters out of their apartment building, and they all meet up at this restaurant and they realize that they have this in common. What was interesting was that Charles was very open as well as Oliver, but Mabel was pretty mysterious. Do you think that was warranted? You know, you don't give all your business to two strange men, right? Even if they live in your building, especially if they live in your building, right?
And this is New York. This is all set in New York. New Yorkers are not the friendliest of people. So to me, it makes perfect sense that she's going to be kind of closed off and not necessarily excited to. It's not like they have some commonalities because there's the age difference or the gender difference. So to me, it made perfect sense. But at the same time, because we see Mabel is someone who has fantasies of killing people with a crochet needle, to me, she was sketchy. She was very sketchy from jump.
And we find out, I believe, at the end of this episode that she actually did know Tim Kono. In one way or another, and that was interesting.
He was a part of her Hardy Boys.
Her Hardy Boys. Well, again, after reconnecting at the booth, they decided to sneak in the back way to look into this murder. I don't think I'm that ballsy to do that, Ashley. Would you?
Absolutely not. I don't want to see a crime scene. I don't want to see a dead body. That's not my thing.
Never. And again, they see the crime scene, all right, blood and all. So one of the things I wanted to mention before we go on to the next episode is this monologue that Charles gives Mabel while they were sneaking into the apartment. He's a has-been actor who was on a TV show called Brazos. And he pretty much talked about how he was just like his father. And because of that, he didn't want to be with anyone because his father treated his mom awful. Episode 2, who was Tim Kono? The group begins researching the victim. Meanwhile, Mabel's secretive past starts to unravel. So I mentioned that monologue at the end of episode 1. Mabel finds out very quickly that it was from an episode of Brazos. How did you feel about them lying to one another? Again, I know they don't know each other, but it's just like some of these lies are pretty intense, Ashley.
Well, I'm glad that it turns out that the story itself was true. He basically said that the monologue that he gave in Brazos, that was one of the few times that they let him have some control over his, I guess, script or lines. And so he went with something that was true to him, because it was going to be heartbreaking to me if this whole spiel about his life was fabricated. Like I felt like Mabel did. It was the moment that she felt like he had opened up, so it helped her to open up, right? And I think when he clarified that, it was like, okay, cool. But then you realize at the end of episode 1, well, Mabel's hiding a huge secret. So when is that ish going to come out? That's way bigger than him lying about his dad. You know what I mean? Like, sis, you had a whole relationship with the deceased and you're just not going to say anything? Okay. Shady. Again, she's shady.
Very shady. Very shady. They come together after seeing the crime scene and decide to make a podcast out of trying to figure out who or how Tim Kono died. One of their first opportunities to get a lot of information was his memorial in the lobby. And we find out very quickly that he was not liked by the neighbors. There was more grief around the cat, Evelyn. And then there was a man.
The disrespect.
A young man.
The disrespect.
We find out during this memorial that he was the reason why they weren't allowed to use their fireplaces. His one neighbor, the African lady, wanted his apartment, which made her a possible suspect. One of my favorite lines was, she wouldn't be the first New Yorker to kill for real estate. But the cat man was over the top, Ashley. What did you think about Tim Kono's relationship with his neighbors?
Thought it was sad.
Yeah.
I think to your point about the main trio being loners, Tim Kono was also a loner, it seems. But not only was he a loner, he was so despised by everybody that they didn't even have a kind word to say in death. Like in death is supposed to be the time that even if people hated you, they pull something out.
They don't speak ill of you.
Yeah,
exactly.
You pull something out to have to say. So when everybody was more upset about Evelyn, I was frustrated because this is a man's life we're talking about. So that it just made me sad for Tim. I was like, where's his family? Like, that's one of the things, the points within the show that I didn't really love, is that they never really honored this man's life.
Yeah. Well, they said in a very throwaway line that his body was with his family in Japan, but
but I want to see it. I want to see somebody. I want to see some level of something.
And we didn't even get that, because to that point, Ashley, we get more of an understanding of who Tim Kono was from his friend Mabel. She had a whole video, and at the end of the episode, she's like, in case I'm next, but she talks about the history of the relationship. She is in that apartment because her aunt lived there. He was a resident there with his family. He was abrasive, and they came together as kids and fell in love with the Hardy Boy books. You know, actually, I'm not going to lie. Part of me almost wondered if Mabel was supposed to be like an older woman, like a Diane Keaton type age, like on par with Steve Martin and Martin Short. Like, I'm just interested to know, like, when did they decide to, like, yes, let's put a millennial there instead of a woman of, you know, their age? Because I don't know about the Hardy Boys. Like, have you heard about that?
I've heard of the Hardy Boys. Have I ever read a book? No. I mean, that was definitely, to whoever made that point, Steve Martin or whatever, that's definitely before our time. Now, obviously, there are people our age younger who get into things that precede us. Course, and, you know, that makes total sense. But I think it is something to be said that maybe was a little bit of an older soul, you know, but I think it's because she's seen and dealt with things that other people in her age have not necessarily had to deal with. That's true. But yeah, they formed a group that they called themselves the Hardy Boys. So it was Tim Kono, Mabel, Oscar, and Zoe. And Zoe apparently was the life of the party, but that all comes to an end after a New Year's party where Zoe died. Oscar was blamed, but Tim apparently knew who did it and never said anything about it. I thought this was interesting because, again, we know the main story was who killed Tim Kono, but then to get this other layer added in addition to of like what happened to Zoe, I thought that's what kind of started reeling me in for this series. What about you? I just wondered what could possibly have happened to make Tim keep his mouth shut about something that happened to his friend. Like, if we are this foursome and we're so cool and everything, what could have possibly, and how did you live with it? You know? So again, I was curious about Tim. I wanted to know more about this particular character because just things weren't adding up for me at this point. And you let your friend go to jail. Sorry. Not only did your friend die, you let your other friend go to jail. Exactly. Episode 3. How well do you know your neighbor? Oliver employs his theater director skills to analyze the case. Charles and Mabel question an obsessive cat lover. Actually, this one was rough. You know, one of the things that I loved about this series is we slowly got a chance to know more about our trio. And in this episode, we learned a lot about Oliver. He is a great Broadway musical director. And this one particular musical was the end of his career. 2005 Splash. Or Splat, as it becomes known. The musical that was already not $4 million over budget, that he wanted more money because he wanted a pool as the base. The stage opens to a pool. In what Broadway theater are we building this? Okay. What insurance company would ever agree to that? That is my question. So the investigation, I'll get more into that a little bit later, but that's, you know, to hint to some of his money woes. Because one of the things I did mention was that he, in episode 1, asked his son for some money. And his son was like, nope, not again. That was painful. And he has a lot of overdue bills. And his time at Arconia was
was numbered because he hadn't been paying his bills, Ashley. But basically, in this episode, Charles and Mabel investigate the cat guy because he had some major issues with Tim Kono, and he was a possible suspect. A lot happened in this situation. Basically, they were trying to record him. So that whole scene was kind of funny when he was like, "You're being recorded." He was like, "What?"
Well, because he was like, "Do you consent?" Kind of tried to ask him first, "You consent to be recorded?" He said no. He said okay, and then recorded him anyway.
Yeah. But we find out that he himself is going through a lot of grief due to the death of, I think this was like Evelyn 7.
His beloved Evelyn.
Everywhere. But something happened to where Charles's nose starts to bleed and old dude faints. And in efforts to help him, they go into the freezer and find his frozen cat. Ashley, what would you have done if you saw a frozen cat in someone's personal freezer? Like, no words.
I would have ran out of that apartment and possibly reported him to somebody. He needs help. That man, he fainted at the sight of blood, but not out of that fucking cat hair that was all over his sweater. Like, I just didn't understand the irony of the entire situation. You have your whole cat dead, touching the peas and the cucumbers and whatever else you got up there in the frozen food section of your freezer, but you pass out at the sight of a little blood. Like, he was a weird dude.
Very weird. But they find out very quickly that he couldn't possibly be the murderer because he faints at the sight of blood. But one of the nuggets that was really great from this episode, Ashley, was that he was getting his cat tested because he believed that she was poisoned. So the reason why I brought up Oliver's money issues is because he had the audacity to ask the guy who produced his last musical for money for this podcast. Teddy Demas. And he was able to convince him, even though this Splat was the biggest flop ever on Broadway that resulted in 3 bankruptcies and 2 insurance investigations and the loss of his son's college fund. Ashley, what is the audacity? Like, I could never.
Only the charisma of a white man. I will say that for damn sure. Like, who else could get money out of people like this? I mean, I've just never seen such. But hey, for any investors out there, we're in the market. Hit us up, okay?
Let us know. We can use some sponsors. Davis Chicken Wrap presents Only Murders in the Building. Oh, Ashley, one of my favorite quotes, though, happened in episode 2 when we find out that Oliver doesn't lock his doors. And Selena was like, I guess white men only are scared of colon cancer and societal change.
That was a great line.
2 more important things happen at the end of episode 3. Sting is a resident of their Upper West Side apartment building, and he doesn't like dogs. And somehow Oliver's dog gets sick. Dun, dun, dun.
He also had a death threat on his door, didn't he?
He sure did. The door was open. He saw that note, and his poor dog was laying there sick. That was really sad.
Not little Winnie.
Little Winnie. Episode 4, The Sting. Believing the murderer might be a famous resident whom is difficult to access, the group seeks advice from a renowned podcasting host. So to your point, Ashley, Tina Fey enters the chat. Sydney Canning. And one of the things that I love about her humor is just so goofy, but I love it. Like when she was like, they were like, how were you able to get, that special insight on one of her cases? She was like, I cooked a turkey. No one could deny I cooked turkey. Could you, Ashley, if somebody showed up to your doorstep asking you for information, would you cook turkey?
Yo, somebody showed up to my door with a turkey. I'm like, is this poisoned? Who brings an entire turkey to somebody's house? Like, That's a lot. That's a lot. But can I just be honest? I didn't feel like they made the best use of their time with Cinda. I was like, you have this woman who her podcast just got bought for $30-something million. And all y'all want to know is how to get next to Sting. Like, I would have spent as much time as I could have with this woman. Are y'all kidding me?
Exactly. So one of the things about Tim Kono that we find out at this point is that he had recently lost his job. He's a lonely man, and the reason why he lost his job was because he lost a client. He lost millions of dollars of the client's money. And we find out that Sting recently lost millions of dollars in an investment. So that's where some of the evidence that the trio was looking into with. I can't believe they actually told her that their main suspect was Sting. Like, I mean, I guess no one, leave no stone unturned, they say, right? But I thought that was silly and hilarious also, by the way.
That was one of the ways they got their foot in the door, because if you tell somebody, oh, we're investigating a murder in a building and the prime suspect is Sting, yeah, I'm assuming you're going to get possibly at least a phone call or an email back. That's intrigue right there. So,
yeah. The other thing that I really did enjoy about this series was their use of celebrity cameos. Like, I enjoyed Sting. I enjoyed Tina. But I did not enjoy Porky Pig and Bugs Bunny following Charles around. I was like, what are we doing with this series? And mind you, this series came out one episode at a time, which, obviously everything is out now, but I don't know. I watched it in real time. How did you feel about, waiting each week for a new episode for this series?
I started to get used to it with all of the shows that drop on everything outside really of like Netflix. A lot of the streaming folks do this now. And I don't love it. I don't love it because I've gotten used to the binge watching world, but it's a competitive landscape out here. So for business reasons, it makes sense to keep us hooked, right?
Well, for a lot of the other platforms that's not Netflix, they probably don't have the money or the talent to drive brand new content and just dumping it, all
the
at
levels
once.
That Netflix drops new content is, absurd compared to most other platforms.
Exactly.
With original content.
Content. Exactly. So 2 more important things happen in this episode, Ashley. Charles starts flirting with the bassoon lady.
That flirtation by musical instrument was refreshingly old school and lovely. I loved it.
And I love it because, Steve is an actual musician. And the other thing is he's the creator of the show. I didn't mention that. He's the creator and executive producer. Actually, all of the trio have levels of executive producing, but it was created by Steve. He has a love for true crime. So
in real life.
So I love that about this show. Oliver's son revealed that Mabel knew Tim Kono. He knew about the Hardy Boys. So that was the big dun 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 at the end of this particular episode.
I appreciated that because Will would have been
around that
age group.
Yep.
To have been paying attention and to know the kids who lived in that building. So I loved that that made so much sense.
Episode 5, twist. A suspicious Charles and Oliver follow Mabel when she slips away on a solo mission to track the victim's final days. Ashley, I'm going to come back to this episode when we get towards the end because I have a lot to say about this episode. But in the grand scheme of things, it actually seems simple, but I have a connection there. One of the things that I loved about this episode was the introduction of Aphrodite, which is a car that Oliver had paid in the garage. And he said he hadn't had his license in 25 years. The fact that he named his car Aphrodite was beyond also. I love Oliver so much.
I love that car. I would totally drive that car.
Would you?
Oh yeah, I love unique, eclectic cars.
Oh really?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that about you, Ashley.
Absolutely.
Mabel is walking. We have a new narrator. We find out quickly that it's Oscar, who is AKA tie-dye guy. He just got out of prison for the death of his girlfriend.
After 10 freaking years.
That's a long time to know that you are innocent.
Yep.
Rough. But she said something very interesting, Ashley. She said she knew he was following her, and she was able to pin him down and had her knitting needle, and said she always wanted to kill someone with her knitting needle. I'm like, okay, sis, you okay?
Jumped on his ass like a spider monkey. I was like, she has been waiting. She's been waiting her whole life for this moment.
Well, in the first episode, she's like, you know, when you're in New York City, you listen to true crime because you try not to get got, you know?
Sure. There you go. You got to be prepared. Sure. Stay ready.
Sure. We follow Mabel as she finds a clue. She found a solo clue. Again, by herself, seeming very shady. She's looking to see where all this jewelry is from. And Oscar helps her figure it out because, again, she says this in a previous episode also, she tends to ride in groups. Do you ride in groups, Ashley?
I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a loner because I definitely make friends easily, but I don't feel like I'm cliquey. I don't know. Some people have like cliques. I can't say that I've ever been a cliquey person. Like I prefer to kind of bounce around and kind of get to know a wide variety of types of people versus sticking with like this core group that those are only people you really hang out with much. Yeah. I can't say I'm that person. What about you?
I've always had friendships with guys like my whole life. I actually have more guy friends through the years than girlfriends. I actually didn't make really good girlfriends until like college, really. Like, because it's funny because when it comes to high school friends, it's more of proximity, but like college, I think your friendships you're able to, you know, dig a little deeper, if that makes any sense.
I agree.
But in any case, when it comes to guy friends, I tend to make them two at a time. Like I'm always talking to two guy friends at a time. And that's interesting. That it has been that way since first grade. My first two dudes were Roy and Matthew. And then it's gone through the years. My best guy friends are Ahmad and Demetrius. They're my best friends from high school or from college. But yeah, and then I even made some here in Cincinnati. So it's just really funny. I don't know. I just thought that was worth mentioning because they had some cool snippets here and there with the series. But I bring up her friendship because Oscar was very much into solving clues as well. And he reminded her that Tim Kono had an appointment to see her cousin who gave them their whale tattoos. So that they're headed there in Jersey. So Aphrodite couldn't make the journey without making a pit stop. And this is actually one of my favorite scenes. Oliver and Charles meet up with the yard dogs. And the thing that cracked me up is they are the horticultural podcast. And I'm like, everyone has a podcast. But then what I love the most is when they were trying to belittle.
When Martin Short was.
Yes, trying to belittle their podcast. They're like, oh, how many people do you have? And they're like, oh, well, you know, we got.
They doing the damn thing. They cool with Cinda Canning too. Cinda's our girl. Yes. Like they were on a different level. I loved it because Martin Short really thought he was, you know, talking trash. He just didn't know who he was talking to.
Big trash.
And I also appreciate the whole gem of mistletoe being a toxic parasite and a tree assassin. I was like, now that's a gem right there for the holiday season. Gem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so Oscar makes it to their location with Mabel, and he's pretty much trying to tell her, like, yo, can we just chill? He's like, I just got out. I'm not about to try to figure out another mystery. Again, another funny moment for me. He was like, I got certified in trap yoga in prison. I'm thinking about opening up a shop. I'm like, that tickled me so much. But
do your thing, Oscar. He's trying to move forward in his life.
Exactly. But basically he caves in because he has a thing for Mabel. Like, their chemistry was pretty intense for them to not have been together.
I felt some type of way about it. I'm gonna be honest.
Did you?
Yes, it was awkward to me that this guy, Oscar, went to prison for possibly everybody thinking that he had murdered his girlfriend, who was part of this crew that y'all were all friends with, but somehow y'all immediately seemed like y'all had some type of love connection. Was this going on when he was still with Zoe? Like, we saw a little flash of New Year's where he complimented how Mabel looked. Yep. And Zoe obviously went on up and up, and then those flashbacks, she was doing her thing as well. But I'm just saying, like, to me, it was a little awkward. It was like, how good of friends were we really with Zoe? You know what I mean? I don't know.
Well, Zoe was a bitch, but we learned that a little bit later.
That's still your girl. Just a bitch you choosing to be friends with. Okay.
Very true. Very true.
That was still your girl.
Mabel makes it to her cousin's shop, and guess what? Oliver and Charles are there too, and they kind of bust her in her tracks saying, hey, you knew Tim Kono this whole freaking time. If you were them, would you feel betrayed? I know this is a simple answer, but...
Well, it's funny because I liked that Martin Short was more gung-ho about thinking she was a liar than Steve Martin did. Steve Martin was trying to give her the benefit of the doubt for a while. I'm definitely Martin Short. I'm like, oh, she been lying way too long for my comfort. I don't trust this chick.
A possible suspect.
Yeah, I don't trust this chick. I'm not team, oh, let's hear the details here. No, you've been lying. What's really good? And I'm gonna need some answers from you, sis.
Yeah, because at this point she was sneaking around too long.
And she was with tie-dye guy, right? We think tie-dye guy might have been a suspect. And you run around with tie-dye guy.
Very true. So she gives them an explanation that apparently was good enough. And at the end of this episode, there was a lot of jewelry on that pool table, Ashley.
It's only because she cute. I swear to you, it's only because that was part of the reason why they let it go so quickly, in my opinion. It's because she cute.
Interesting. There was one gem, wink, wink, that was also worth noting. Tim Kono was trying to take down a black market jewelry dealer named Angel. Sorry, I was supposed to say Ashley.
Ashley's a thug name too. Ashley's a thug name too. There's a thug named Ashley out there in these streets.
Bad boys for life. Okay. Episode 6. To protect and serve. Mabel brings her friends to her childhood home to meet her mother. Detective Williams starts to have her own doubts about the case as she prepares for motherhood. I really did enjoy Detective Williams.
Besides her hairstyle.
Yeah, that wig was awful. Awful. But basically, she was convinced that this Tim Kono case was open and shut. It was ruled a suicide. Her wife, however, is a fan of the podcast. Only murders in the building. And she tells her, like, hey, honey, you might want to look at this. Detective Williams is like, what do I look like going to my chief saying, hey, let me reopen this closed case? That's a no for me. Well, it's kind of messed up because toxicology report was not submitted. The phone didn't enter evidence. Like, it had me really concerned, Ashley. Did you feel like this murder was like from someone high up? What did you think at this point? Or do you think this was just a failed a failed precinct, unable to follow through on procedure?
I think I thought the latter, but it's interesting you say that because now that I think about it, they never, to me, illuminated on why things were not submitted as they should have been with the case. So that's actually, to me, a unresolved situation now that we've watched the entire series, because I was thinking the latter, but now that you bring that up, what was really going on? I guess it was just negligence, but that's a little scary.
That's very scary. Very, very scary. So again, like the summary of this episode says, Detective Williams had her doubts. Back to our trio. Oliver and Charles meets Mabel's mom. Mabel's mom, you can tell she's hardworking, loves her daughter a lot, but just is truly disappointed with all the grief that her daughter had gone through all these years. She convinced the guys to let her drop out of this investigation. Were you surprised that Mabel didn't fight to stay with, the investigation even after meeting with her mom?
No, I wasn't surprised. I think it was more so that was a good opportunity for us as an audience to get a better glimpse at what was really going on with Mabel. Because again, to this point, everything that was going on with her seemed a bit shady, like she was lying about things. So to get the background of the trauma behind her losing her friend and what happened with her friend group at such a young age. And anytime a mom enters into the equation, you see that protectiveness. Me as the audience, I'm like, okay, now I feel a bit protective too, because this was your child. Yeah. And she did go through something very traumatic. So I wasn't surprised that Mabel didn't put up too much of a fight, because just like us, it was probably like, well, her mom didn't make sense, right? Like her mother just wanted what was best for her. And Oscar's back. So you have a lot to unpack with his return. You know what I mean? And I don't think since Tim had died, Mabel had really stepped back to consider how she felt about everything. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they hadn't talked, they hadn't spoken, but that was still another one of your friends who's gone.
That's an excellent point, Ashley. Well, the group finds out that Tim was investigating this, black market jewelry dealer because he was convinced that they had the ring that Zoe had on when she died on that New Year's Day. The guys came back to their apartment. Mabel stayed back with her mom and Oscar. And Oliver gets a call from Teddy about the podcast. Our girl Cinda made it to Fallon, and she was joking about their podcast, Only Murders in the Building. And Teddy was beside himself, and he wanted to give more money to the podcast. And, Oliver is like, show me the money. Okay, show me the money. Whereas Charles is like, hey, we don't have Mabel anymore. Should we stop the podcast? Do you think they should have taken that money and continued on, even if she didn't return? Because, spoiler alert, she came back.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think they should have taken the money and kept on. Charles was the host. Oliver was the producer. Mabel wasn't even, I don't think, actually a main part of the production of the podcast, besides probably being a part of some of the audio recording. So sure, why not? Let's go.
Yeah. I would never.
No offense, Mabel.
$50,000 for what?
Right. When he was about to rip up that check, I was like, can y'all go ahead and pass that over to recapping with Laura and Ashley? We'll take it. We'll take it. Again, any sponsors listening, we're open. We're available. Let's meet. Let's have a conversation.
As I mentioned, Mabel came back with Tim Kono's phone, dropped by anonymously. But we all know that it was from Detective Williams.
Was that unethical?
Girl, yes. Absolutely. But shouldn't they have done the toxicology report? Shouldn't they have put his phone into evidence? What the hell? It's just kind of messed up, because it's like, are fans figuring out these cases?
Possibly.
I mean, I hate to bring up some of the recent missing people, but social media played a major role in finding out what happened to these people. Fortunately,
like Gabby Petito and Brian
and Julius. So yeah, girl, I don't know. I'm not trying to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. I mean, I asked, was it unethical? But I guess it's one of those things to me where does it matter if the case actually is resolved? Because sometimes I feel like you have to circumvent the system, or you have to circumvent rules if it's in the greater good of whatever it is your mission is. I'm not saying that to say people should do a bunch of dirty stuff. I'm saying in this case, if her sending the cell phone helped to crack this case and to find out who really killed Tim, was that a bad thing? I don't think so.
Yeah, I guess that conversation of like the greater good over procedural, right?
Yes. Yes.
Great point. Episode 7, Ashley, the boy from 6B. As the investigation scratches at a web of old crimes that originated inside the building, a mysterious young man turns the tables and spies on Charles, Oliver, and Mabel. This has to be like my favorite episode of the series. This entire episode was completely silent. We get the perspective of Theo, the son of Teddy. And I saw someone say this online, and I agree. They're like, this is Emmy material. And I'm like, they're absolutely going to be winning awards for this series. I have a feeling about it, because Hollywood loves a revival, and we haven't seen Steve Martin Short in like a minute. You know what I mean? Yeah. They're going to be nominated for sure.
Let me just say, going back to Insecure from last week, if Insecure does not win an Emmy, I'm going to stop watching the Emmys. You hear that, Academy? I'm going to stop watching.
You know, Emmys are like Oscars. Sometimes you don't get it when you're supposed to get them.
Yeah, but this is the final season. If they do not get an Emmy, I'm going to stop watching.
All right, going down a quick rabbit hole. Is Anthony Anderson going to finally get his Emmy? Nominated, I think, every year that Blackish has been out.
Tracy? Is Tracy? I don't know.
Is Ted Lasso going to take that away from them again?
Better not, because season 2 is not worthy. Season 2 is not worthy.
Ooh.
Yep. I said it.
Okay. Okay. Kind of like Oliver's son, there are more kids in this building, and around the same age as the Hardy Boys. And it's Theo. And I say his name like that because he out here riding real dirty.
Who came up with all these names in this series? Now that you point out Mabel, I'm listening to everybody's names. All these names are old. Like, nobody's name is like
Ashley,
young,
Brandon, like Oscar. I don't know any young Oscars.
No. Everybody's name is kind of older.
Oh my gosh. Jan, we'll get to her. Goodness gracious. I love it. I always use your name, Ashley, but we could also say Jessica. Or, these generic Emma,
everyday names. Even Michael. I mean, you could have had a Michael. You could have there's all sorts of names that are still prevalent today. You know what I mean? Like, all of these are like, who's grandma? Who's grandpa? Y'all talking about Theo. I ain't heard that name since the Huxtables on television.
Where's Ethel while we're at it?
Exactly. Even Evelyn, the cat. The cat's got an old name. Cat's Evelyn.
Yes.
You got Winnie as the dog. Like, what?
Oh my God. Yes. Well, yeah, exactly. So this entire episode is from Theo's perspective. We get a present view of what he's doing, and he's out here spying on the trio. He is losing his nerve because something is up. I forgot to mention at the end of episode 6, they're very own sponsor becomes a suspect because of his angel check. This episode makes it very clear for the audience that, yeah, something's very dicey going on over there at the Dip King's house. I'm just like, because Theo is looking very suspect. And again, he's following them. The trio decides to sneak into Teddy's apartment because, again, he's now suspect number one. Oliver goes out to a quick lunch with Teddy, and Mabel and Charles go into the apartment, and they find a secret room full of urns. That was creepy. That was very creepy because at first you didn't know why there were so many urns, but you learn very quickly that they're freaking grave robbers.
That is a new one for me. I was like, of all the shows that we watch and consume, this was a first that the shadiness was because y'all stealing jewelry and valuables from dead people. Who knew?
That's very low. That's so low, Ashley. Like,
but you know what I also love? And I don't know if the community of people with disabilities would agree with this whatsoever, but I actually thought that it was dope that they had a person with disabilities as a villain. I was like, I feel like it's a step forward because it's more diversity on screen to show his disabilities didn't limit him from the shenanigans, you know what I mean, from being a central part of this story.
A criminal ring.
Exactly. Like, they may be like, nah, we don't want to do with that. But I'm just saying, to me, it was like, oh, that's actually pretty dope.
Yeah. Great point there. We get some flashbacks and we realize that Zoe was doing some heavy flirting with Theo. She was very versed in ASL and she had this connection with this young man in her building. But their connection got in the way because that emerald ring, Ashley, Teddy noticed it was missing and he told Theo to get it back. Enter, what is that, 2010 New Year's? Theo was trying to get the ring back. The flirting, I guess, got to him so much so that he thought he had a shot. And she laughed in his face, Ashley.
Ooh. Oof. Cringy.
That was rough. Why'd she do that? She did call herself a bitch, but still.
And she also has said that it was a bad time. Like, I'm not going to be good company right now. So she was in an ugly mood, but that still doesn't excuse it, obviously. I mean, I don't think that that Theo probably had a chance with her, but, he was a sweet dude. And he was approaching her in a caring, kind way. So it was unfortunate.
Wasn't aggressive, right?
Yeah.
Well,
and she was flirting with him. Like, he was minding his own business. She up here running her hands up his back and stuff. I said, girl.
Yeah. Well, she seems like the type of person that manipulates people. You know what I mean? She just
seemed like she liked to play games. I mean, she played with people. Yeah. But she was rich. Her family owned a floor at the Arconia.
Entire floor. Yeah. But we find out very quickly that her death was indeed an accident and not necessarily a murder.
That was very sad.
Very sad. But this is where the criminal activity comes into play, Ashley. Tim Kono saw what happened, and Teddy strong-armed Tim not to say a word. And because of that, we know what happened. Oscar went to jail for 10 years for no reason. Mabel lost all of her friends, all of them, whether in death, prison, or just separation. And that was rough.
I could not take Nathan Lane seriously as a thug. I think I texted you this before. Like, to me, it was utterly ridiculous that we're taking these man's threats this seriously, that we're going to remain silent. Like, what?
He tried, Ashley. Come on now.
Girl, I'm like Nathan Lane from Broadway musicals, Nathan Lane, from Mouse Hunt, Nathan Lane. It's from Timon and Pumbaa, Nathan Lane.
Birdcage.
That's what I'm saying. Like, come on. Nathan Lane is thugging out here and threatening people. And with what? With what? I ain't seen you kill nobody. I don't trust that you're going to kill me. So why would I keep my mouth shut? If I tell on your son, there will be consequences and ramifications. So I wouldn't be scared.
He's a powerful man, Ashley. I don't know.
To me, I didn't get it. Like, I feel like they needed someone who was way more intimidating for me to fully invest in me being that scared, right? Somebody being that scared. And I just didn't feel that with Nathan Lane. Sorry, Nathan. I know you did your thing, but no, you a baby. You're not even a baby thug. You soft. Like, that's it.
Oh my gosh.
You soft and fluffy. You a teddy bear.
All right. Episode 8, fan fiction. Hitting a dead end, the group calls for reinforcements in the form of their podcast superfans. So
I love the superfans.
Me too. So at the end of episode 7, Mabel and Oliver got caught. They caught Theo red-handed. How was one man able to wrap 2 people up, though, and throw them in the back of a truck? I'm like, y'all were thinking fast enough on your feet, because it was 2 against 1. He ain't that strong.
Especially with Mabel with this knitting needle that she's been so quick to use. Like, suddenly she was a damsel in distress.
Exactly.
I could see Martin Short. He's a little older. You may get to catch up with him.
Yep.
That's what I'm saying. The whole angle of them being, like, scary, it never clicked for me.
That's funny. I mean, I wasn't scared, but I was very concerned. I was like, oh my goodness, they are now in danger. This quick, side project has turned into something very, very real. So one of the things that also happened in episode 7 that I didn't mention was Charles had his first date with Jan, and they connected in a very, very intimate way. So much so that he didn't check his phone like he probably would have done if he wasn't by himself. You know what I mean? It's, to your point, Nathan Lane, the kingpin, pretty much told Oliver and Mabel that they had to end their podcast. Like, this is your last day. I need for you to end it and say that Tim Kono died from loneliness.
Or what, Nathan? Or what? Let me say back to your Jan and Charles, though. Erotic Scrabble. I didn't know I needed that in my life. I didn't know. I didn't know. They sold that. I said, okay, they sold that. I'm about to give me a Scrabble board, y'all. They sold that.
I love it. Mabel and Oliver catches up with Charles, and they find out that Jan apparently is in this investigation now, sorting through the clues of the phone, and they found out that, in fact, Tim Kono was trying to take down Demas with the grave robbing situation. But Mabel and Oliver were not here for Jan. Do you think their intuition was correct, Ashley, at this point?
I think they were more so just annoyed versus intuition. I think it was just like, who is this woman all of a sudden trying to come in the midst of our investigation? It's been the 3 of us. We didn't ask for your opinion, because she was just coming on a little strong, She came
on extremely strong. It's like, do you realize this is 3 of us? Like, this is an A and B conversation.
It takes you back to like when you in school and you've been working on a group project, and then all of a sudden somebody else want to come in and get a 2 cents. Nobody asked you. So I'm gonna need you to step back, have a seat, please, because this is done. This clique has been formed. We're going to resolve this. You know what I'm saying? So I got it. I understood it.
So Mabel was so shook that she was like, we need real reinforcements. So they called up Detective Williams. And this is where I kind of was annoyed when she was like, well, make the case, have your who, why, how, and why now. And I'm like, you really are signing these people this case? Like, you're the one that gets paid to do this.
Yeah, I literally said, would a cop really take them seriously? In this day and age, I think that was actually realistic, because to your point, the power of social media, the fact that people have a lot of information, I think a cop may have just let them run with it for real.
Ooh.
I'm not saying that's a great thing. I'm just saying I think it's real.
So they realize that they need help with this case because, again, they are on a time crunch, and outside of their apartments are superfans that help them come up with how to close this case. And ultimately, in a very bold move, they decided to pin Tim Kono's death on the Demuses.
Makes sense.
I was surprised by that, though, because I'm like, this man threatened real death to you, but you're going to close out your podcast on pinning it on him, who's also the sponsor. I just thought that was ballsy.
The sponsor thing is the part that made it not make a whole lot of sense to me, because I agree with, well, why would Teddy sponsor a podcast that could implicate him? You know what I'm saying? It could be, that whole keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. But if anything, you try to squash the pod. You know what I mean? So that didn't make sense. But again, the whole Teddy threatened my life thing, I'm going to go ahead and expose you, because then the cops are going to come pick you up and your death threats mean nothing. Like, we act like Teddy's a member of a gang out here.
Yeah, that's true. And even if they didn't kill Tim Kono, they have the grave robbing thing.
For sure. There's still illegal activities.
And the cover up of Zoe's murder.
Exactly. So, absolutely. Yeah. They got blood on their hands.
They sure do. Well, they pin it on the Demuses and find out very quickly that Tim Kono was poisoned and the Demuses were outside during the time of murder. And the episode ends with Jan being stabbed in the back. Dun, dun, dun. Episode 9, Double Time. As the residents grow upset at the building's negative publicity, the trio faces a revolt. Charles' old colleague visits and sheds light on their past. So apparently Jane didn't see who stabbed her in the back. Were you suspicious of this, Ashley?
I was at the time.
You were?
Suspicious about her, or suspicious about what happened to her?
What happened to her?
Yeah, I was suspicious of what happened to her at this point, because I just wasn't sure, given everything that was happening, it seems like, anybody could get got at any time. So yeah, I was curious as to who it was or what it was that was causing her to be attacked. Obviously, she's close with and dating Charles. Obviously, she's now part of this investigation. I wasn't sure what was going on with Jan. But I definitely thought it was funny that she was passed out after a little stab in the side. I was like, she really lose that much blood? Okay.
I was concerned because I thought she could have been dead. So I was relieved to see that she was only stabbed. I was concerned for her because of, me caring for Charles, frankly. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I want to see Charles happy. Yeah.
Exactly.
Not that we don't care about a person's life, but yes.
No. But in relation to the show, we have Saz.
This is one of my favorite parts of the entire series.
The entire series. Okay. Jane Lynch is everything. I promise you she's going to get nominated for an Emmy for guest starring for this. She was Brazzo's stunt double, right? And the thing that cracked me up was like everyone loved her over him.
Yeah, everyone. Whose stunt double outshines them? Like,
exactly, which is part of the humor that I loved about this show. Like, that in itself is hilarious, and she was so charismatic. And that the audience, I loved her. I loved her.
Everybody did.
And the fact that one of his own girlfriends left him for her, peak. Amazing.
That Cookie. Fuck you, Cookie. Okay. But it was one of my favorite Martin Short moments too, because he came and was like, whatever you've done too much. Like, it was amazing. It was amazing.
Yes. And of course, with Saz being so amazing, she pointed out one of the most important things when it comes to solving a mystery: the motive.
Exactly, yeah.
Quickly, literally, she wasn't even around there for long, and she had the evidence of the cocktail drinks and the trash, and she was like, this is a crime of passion. These are cocktail drinks, and this person could have very well been poisoned. And I was like, brilliant. This is why she's Saz.
One thing I was thinking is, are you selling yourself short by just being a stunt double? She was about to go stunt for Tilda Swinton. It's like, you are a star. Like, you should be a star.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, her marrying him the whole time while they sit at the table, and so funny. So funny.
Steve Martin also, he allows himself to have such a quiet humor in this. You know, he's very slapsticky humor in a lot of his stuff when he was younger. So he's like almost the straight person to everybody else's over the top. Yeah. And I appreciate that he can do both. Yeah,
that's a good point. Really good point. Well, apparently Jan is good enough to perform at the orchestra like she does. She tells him that she's first chair, which if you're in symphonic or orchestra, kind of a big deal. She doesn't want him to go, though, because she's upset that he was accusing Saz of making a move on her and her falling for it, and that was not the case. But he goes anyway and finds very quickly that Jan be lying, Ashley. Did you have any doubts about her up until this point?
I didn't, but I blame who they cast as the actress, because I had just seen her in my one therapy show that I've told you guys about too many times on HBO Max. And she played the therapist on Gabriel Byrne's final season. She was his therapist in treatment. So that was the last role I just saw her in. And so seeing her now in this, it was like, oh, but I trust you. Like, I already have like a rapport with you. So I just didn't have any inkling that I should be suspicious of this woman. And then how rare is it for a woman to be a murderer in a series like
about this? Let's go back to even our GOT days. They always say that women like to kill poison. That's the weapon of choice.
And it makes sense because we don't have the strength.
Yep.
Over men,
force,
to kill in that sort of way. And we'll get to this, but she's a Black Widow at the end of the day, and that's the Black Widow's, one of the Black Widow's keys is poison.
Calling call. Yeah, because the sex toy that they had from episode 1 was actually a bassoon cleaner. I'm not gonna lie, it was so funny in episode 1 with Oliver waving it around like, "Ooh, Tim Kono, I see what you're
Who's touching on other people's sex toys?" I was like, "Ew, where's that been? What are we doing? Are we slapping that around?"
And that was the revelation that Oliver and Mabel found, and so.
But Tim Kono was supposed to be a hell of a lover. Give him that credit. Had her screaming.
So true. The neighbor, she was like, he apparently knew what he was doing.
Put some respect on Tim Kono's name, okay?
Episode 10, Ashley, open and shut. The trio races towards a resolution while their own lives are put in danger. I did like how this episode opened. We finally get to hear from Tim Kono. We find out that he had succumbed to loneliness after the events of that awful New Year's Day in 2010. He was
Took him a while. It had been 10 years.
10 years.
And you was talking about Issa after 1 year. Look at Tim.
Yeah, that's true.
It's been 10.
That's true. And he's like, when you're lonely and someone shows you some attention, you kind of go for it. And he apparently went for it a lot. And
in the elevator,
and apparently in the apartment. And we find out that it was indeed Jan who killed him. She poisoned him and then set up the suicide note and shot him in the head. Now, I did enjoy how this episode unraveled with Charles telling her that he loved her. And he was like, even if you did do it, I think I would still love you. And she was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't expect her to really love him. But the fact that she preys on lonely men, I was like, chick is a predator, Ashley.
Yeah, it reminded me of Uncle Fester on Addams Family Values.
Yes. Great association. I forgot about that.
Yeah, that's what it reminded me of. But can we also say that
get out of it though?
She's mentally disturbed. She's mentally ill. I mean, that's her whole origin to me that they didn't really say, but that we're assuming is that she is mentally ill because this is not the first person. During her whole villainous monologue that she gives to Charles as he's succumbing to the poison.
Every villain gets one. That is very true.
She's basically just telling the tale of, I hate being chosen second. And this is one of my tougher breakups, Charles. I really did fall for you. Ma'am, how many men have you done this to?
And she apparently got away with it often.
Yes, it was about to kill everybody in the building. Okay. It was frightening, actually. It was pretty terrifying.
And I was so concerned because, to your point, Ashley, he thought he outsmarted her. So he didn't take the drink that she made for him.
I knew it was the ice, though. I knew it.
Did you?
I did immediately. I said, Charles, don't take that from her. Because you think about how
know his nose was going to bleed.
No, she had seen his nose bleed. Remember when she was looking at him from the audience? Yeah. So she already knew that. But then my thing was, first of all, who puts ice on a nosebleed? Is that a thing?
I thought you just pinched your nose and put your head up.
Yeah. So that I was really confused by. But you know what my biggest confusion during this whole thing was? The timing. Why did Jan decide to poison Charles before she even knew he knew anything?
Well, I think the timing was he probably was starting to put some things together with her lying. So she probably was like, let me just get rid of him, like, before he figures this out. Like, so if you think about it, she was in the know, and we all knew that she was awful with her clues and things like that. Everybody wanted her to go because of how bad it was. But
Charles had just left the case, remember? Under the threat of them all getting evicted. He was like, I'm done.
That's true too. I don't know.
That was the one thing about at the end. I was like, why now? I guess maybe it was she was always feeling like she was going to have to wrap this up. Like, I can't leave any loose ends type of thing.
Yeah. And, she might do it for a time, right? But my deal is a lot of those people have lived in that building for many years. And again, watching it the second time, I actually heard the bassoon playing when they got off the elevator and they were in their homes by themselves. I heard the bassoon
recorded bassoon thing she did.
So my deal is like, well, was she somewhere else killing these guys? Like, or did she just come home like after each one? That it was just insane. The other thing I wanted to mention was I was so concerned with Charles because obviously the joke was he was poisoned, but had enough strength to get Mabel and Oliver, who knew what was up. They were able to catch her in the basement where, to your point, also, she was going to kill everybody because the fireplaces were now open again. Luckily, she's a bad shot. The cops came. They solved the mystery. But one of the things that I wanted to tie back to episode 5 in particular, Ashley, was their conversation of them feeling betrayed by Mabel and Charles, again, giving her the benefit of the doubt, whereas Oliver did not. There was a lot of foreshadowing going on in that episode. Just like, give her a chance, she's this or that or the other. And I was like, watching it the second time, I'm like, they're giving so many clues in this episode about their conversation towards Mabel. Obviously, it wasn't Mabel, it was Jan eventually. But there, I just wanted to highlight that. And then let's talk about the big cliffhanger at the end of the series here, season 1, I should say. They celebrate their win. They toast. Mabel leaves. All of a sudden, the dreaded fire alarm goes off again, and they get a text message from an unknown number that says, "Get out of the building now." They immediately thought of Mabel because she had left them.
At least Charles did. Oliver wanted to dip.
Always. They make it to her apartment. She looks at them and says, "This is not what you think it is." There's a person on her floor with a tie-dye sweatshirt, and blood all over the place. She stabbed somebody with her knitting needle. Like, supposedly. That's an excellent point. I forgot to even start with this because that's how the season opened. Mm-hmm. This scene, and then we get a flashback of 2 months prior. This is what I didn't like about the series, because I'm like, now they're calling it only murderers in the building. Like, I don't want them to be guilty of anything, but obviously there will be a whole, mystery and everything. But I didn't like that. What about you?
You talk about foreshadowing. Mabel had just told Bunny, congratulations, you're just the most hated bitch. And now you're the most hated bitch in the building. And then Bunny's the one who is killed supposedly by Mabel. So you talk about foreshadowing. Obviously Bunny had made a lot of enemies in season 1 because she was so gung-ho about everything in terms of her power to evict and to not care about anybody else and all this and that. So I have no guesses as to who really killed Bunny. I don't think it was Mabel, obviously.
I don't think so either.
But I liked it because I was curious as to like, where are we about to go now? And how many murderers live in the Arconia? You know what I mean? Like,
girl,
how many are there?
I personally would not be able to live in a place that had that many deaths. Like,
yeah, but how do you get at that's lucrative real estate? Back to Martin or not Martin, back to Charles or Oliver's point earlier. The last thing I want to say about the murdering is that I think Jan's really going to enjoy prison. For some reason, I just have this feeling she's going to live her best life in prison. She seems like she's that type of psycho.
That's right.
Then let me give you and our listeners just my final thoughts overall in this series, Delora. So again, gets a B for me because I wasn't super invested in the Tim Kono angle again, because I just don't think I got enough backstory or, reflection on Tim. But I will say the thing for me that also bothered me was Oscar, because besides Mabel, his father's reaction to Mabel when she originally was coming around trying to ask about him when he was about to get released, I feel like they really sugarcoated Oscar's character and what happened to him. Like, this man was imprisoned for 10 years for a crime that he did not commit. And I feel like the ramifications of that on him and his life.
Like, this is a spring break.
Yeah. He's out and he's still, himself, seemingly. And we're just immediately going to put him into a love connection with Mabel. Like, I get it. It's probably a product of the tone of the show, but I just feel like that was so palpable. And he's a man of color. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, there was so much to be said to me for what happened to him. And I just don't feel like we got enough of the realness of that situation. And that's really my final thoughts.
Yeah. My final thoughts. I didn't know when I first started this season, I didn't know if I could handle Selena Gomez talking the whole time, just because I feel like she talks through her teeth just like this, and it's always sarcasm. Like, I didn't know if I was going to be able to make it. I did. But my question to you is, did you have a favorite out of the trio?
Oliver.
Of course. Absolutely.
It's Martin Short, obviously, that gave him life, because otherwise Oliver is very self-centered. Yes. And
he made him lovable, because honestly, if played by anyone else, I would have hated Oliver.
Probably. But yeah, it's Martin Short. So Martin Short's Oliver is my favorite character.
Oh my goodness. I just loved him also. And I just want to close with like the running joke about him and dips. It just had me rolling. The Demuses take a dip. I'm like, it just was so funny to me. The last thing that he said that had me rolling was like, I've only had dips for dinner for years, and it's fine. I lost 14 pounds and a little bit of hair. But
yeah. He has some great lines in the show. I'm telling you, Martin Short, you are still one of my favorites. I love you so much.
Yes, I'm so happy that he and Steve are working, and I look forward to season 2. So if there's nothing else, time for our hidden gems. Go ahead.
Yeah. I only have one this week. And I know it's the thing we talk about that I don't like horror, but you know what I realize is I like slasher though. So I watched I Know What You Did Last Summer series on Amazon, at least the first 6 episodes that are currently available to watch. Delora, we're 90s kids, had to see how it stacked up to the films, which, by the way, I didn't realize it was based off of a book. That's new to me. Had no idea.
This story is so thin. How is this?
I don't know, because I haven't read the book, but hey, it's a book. The show, though, takes a very different turn than the film does. It reminds me more of like a Pretty Little Liars with more gruesome deaths. Beautiful young cast set in Hawaii. The showrunner, Sarah Goodman, loves a good teen drama thriller, as she's also about to do the Cruel Intentions series, which I'm also super excited for and will definitely be checking out. Now, I cannot say the series is, epic and, it's the best thing since sliced bread, but I think it's worth a watch again, especially if you want to see how it stacks up and compares to the 90s films that we loved, starring Jennifer Love Hewitt and, Sarah Michelle Gellar and
Brandy.
Ryan Phillippe and all those. Well, that was a sequel. What I Still Know What You Did Last Summer for the original, because this is based off the original, Freddie Prinze Jr. So, I think it's worth a watch. It's really getting good. After season 6, we leave on a cliffhanger. So I'm definitely gonna stick with it. And the main actress is phenomenal. Like, she's doing some great acting. So
really,
it's for me, guys, check it out. I Know What You Did Last Summer on Amazon. What about you, Delora?
All right, Ashley, I have one hidden gem as well. It is a movie. It came out 2020. I'm sure it expected to do a lot more than what it did, but pandemic. But I found this on Stars, but it's now on Hulu, and it's called The Broken Hearts Gallery. It is rated PG-13. It's a romance. It's an hour and 50 minutes. To give you some insight on ratings, 79% critics, 88% audience score. So it's a pretty solid film. It's a rom-com, one of my favorite genres. If you don't know already, courtesy of To All the Boys I Love, like and all the other rom-coms,
which I still watch on repeat.
Yes. It stars a South Asian lead, and the guy who's usually in a butthole from, I think the butthole from Stranger Things. Anyway,
with the hair.
With the hair, yeah.
He became more lovable in Stranger Things. He was a dick at first, but he grows on you.
But he grew on me as a leading man. It's also about like self-love and growth within the young woman life. Lucy, that's her name. So if you want to see a good rom-com that's recent, up to date, utilizing today's technology and whatnot, check it out. And of course, she has the cool job. She's a gallerist, you know what I mean, for art. So,
If I lived in New York, that would be one of my jobs. I'm just kidding.
Okay, Charlotte.
And then I'd have to retire to my Manhattan penthouse that Trey left me, all those things. Of course. That sounds weird, though. My brother's name is Trey. Anyway, that's all we got for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed. If you did not get a chance, definitely check out Only Murders in the Building. It is worth a watch. So you guys can stay tuned and join us for season 2. Delora, we'll be back next time for what?
Hot topics
and quick headlines and anything else shenanigans wise is going on in the world of pop culture. We'll see you then. Be blessed.
Bye.